So here I am in the bell of the bench to the rocket stove. And before I close it up, I want to sweep out all the little debris inside of here, as well as just kind of double check and make sure everything looks good from the underside. Hello fellow homesteaders, I'm Nika, and the first layer to the rocket stove bench is almost completed. Before I could start on the actual bench, Brandon wanted me to create a little wall on the inside of the bench, just to help the air funnel towards the J-tube, as well as make the pipe nice and stable and sturdy on the inside as well as the outside, because I'm going to create some little stairs that you'll get to see in the future. But I wanted to make sure this area was nice and stable as well as sloping towards the J-tube. So once that little wall was finished, I cemented in the little bits of cattle panel to prepare to mud in one of the first pieces of mesh. Then I cemented in the edge closest to the wall and got that all situated and stable so that I would be able to start the mud patty layer. And carefully, patty by patty, and smoothing out those patties to make sure they adhered very well to each other and the mesh, I slowly covered the entire bench. And then I scooched my way into the bench to give it a good sweeping. And before I crawl out of here, I wanted to show everybody the pipe that comes from the rocket stove into the bench. The hot air is going to fill the chamber that I am in. The air is going to cool off and sink and be funneled towards this J-tube and get sucked out of the stovepipe. I got the space swept out as best as I could, and now it's time to close up this end. So I am nervous and excited to close up this end, because once this end is closed up, it's kind of finalized when it comes to the shape and how everything is situated. Brandon wants me to create a kind of concave shape on the inside, so I'm going to have to do this a little bit slow and deliberate to try and create that shape. I'm going to be able to smooth it out from the inside for a time until I have to finish the chunk of wall. So being very deliberate with how I'm doing everything is super important, as well as to make sure that this end will be very stable. But once this is finished, the first layer of the rocket stove bench is complete. I had just enough leftover mud to fill in the space between the post and the bench. I used a lot of mud and good rocks so that post is well protected and insulated. Now the whole structure of the rocket mass heater and the bench is completed. Now I still do have to do some layers on the bench portion itself. It's going to take some time to get that built up. But now that everything's sealed and just one solid kind of tube system, we are able to test it out. Couple of things I missed covering in the previous video. The first is that this is a 6-to-1 dirt to Portland ratio. So it is a more cement-like mix, but remember that even though it's a more cement-like mix, it's still very much a mud-like mixture when it dries and even after it cures. You can still chisel and chip and work it if you need to. As well as we're using lava rock from the property, so essentially it's all natural fire brick. And these two materials put together should make for a very wonderful material for this rocket stove. And the ones we have built in the past in a similar fashion, minus the lava rock, worked wonderfully. And layer by layer, as they dry and cure, I am pretty obsessive with making sure each of those layers adheres to each other and that I work the mud really well to avoid any cracking as it dries. As well as I'm watching through the entire drying process to check for cracks, and if I see any cracks, I work those cracks so when it's done drying, they're not actually cracks. But they are weak points I will want to keep an eye on in case they need fixed or patched up later. But as I said, I am super obsessive about making sure everything is pretty much one solid hunk of mud-creete. Really avoiding any cold joints, any cracking, any of those kinds of issues the best I can through the drying process. And cracking can happen by heating up this system. And that's why when you start these systems and get fire going through it, you warm the system up slowly. You don't just start a huge old fire in there because that is what can cause damage. It's kind of the same idea at your house. You start with a small fire in your fireplace and you make it big to the point it needs to be. You don't go overboard. As well as we're in Arizona and we're not going to be running this as much as we would be in Montana. So it's going to get a whole lot less wear and tear. And so far through the drying process, especially of the big mass space itself, I really have no cracking to be seen. There was one place that was maybe kind of trying to crack, but I made sure to keep working that area and make sure that it didn't end up being an actual crack. And the one place it cracked was along the barrel right in here. And you can't really tell that there was a crack trying to form, but the fact that it's where the barrel goes, I'm not surprised. Through my experiences, that is just one place I know that a crack will try to form. But since the barrel is kind of meant to be knocked off if it needs to be, a crack there isn't the end of the world. But all in all, the entire surface is very smooth and everything looks like it's all one piece, one smooth chunk of mud-creete. The virgin burn has been very successful, so I'm going to be seasoning some of my cast iron, as well as I got a warm spot for my sourdough to rise so I can bake bread. Yay for rocket stoves! Peace!